Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Denver Sports Podcast, brought to you by Breckenridge Brewery. Breckenridge Brewery is the official beer of DNVR, and regular seltzers are now being sold in the DNVR bar. So come on down and get any one of their more than I can even count drafts that we have on tap, or pick up a regular seltzer by Breckenridge Brewery. They're our faves. I'm your host again today, Jesse Montano. We're bringing you a special second episode this week, and I am joined by my very good friends here at DNVR, and actually two of the gentlemen that got me started on this road both 5 years ago and then brought me back. My fellow DNVR Avalancher, AJ Haefele, and then the man himself, top dog DNVR, Andre Simone.
Hey, fellas.
Hey, guys, I'm very excited to be doing this. This is a show I've wanted to do for like 5 years. The significance behind this particular little trio was we were the group that did all the old BSN draft podcasts for Broncos. I believe we did one or two for Nuggets.
Yes, we did.
For Avs, yep. All back at the Colorado Media School. We had some super fun late nights, and we experimented with doing live shows for the first time with my phone hooked up to the speakers, just kind of watching you guys. And seriously, this is you guys are two people that mean a lot to me at this company. So it's an honor to get to do the show with you guys again. Thanks for jumping on.
Dead silence.
No, I was waiting for AJ to jump in. But
You're fine. It's cool.
He turned towards the camera, and so I was like, "Oh, he's gonna say something," and then his eyes darted down. I was like, "Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit!" Well, so I want to get into. We're going to talk a little bit about. Actually, we're going to talk a lot about what we're expecting to see out of all the teams here in Denver in 2021. But first, in light of everything that I was just saying, we're gonna shift the clocks back a little bit, 5 years to 2017 when we were doing the BSN Avalanche draft show. And for those of you who that year rings any bells, that was the year that the Avs lost the draft lottery, and I'm using air quotes for that. Fell back to 4.
They lost.
Yeah. They lost the drawing. And we were then tasked with, after AJ and I spent weeks and months talking about a 48-point team, the three of us thought that we were going to at least have a couple months of talking about what do you do with the first overall pick.
Yep.
They end up falling to 4, and we spent several months talking about Cale Makar. And
he's very interested in this topic.
Yeah. And just now, 5 years later, I just wanted us to take a few minutes here to kind of reflect on those conversations that we had, kind of how that draft turned out. And now, with the benefit of hindsight, that we got to do shows talking about what right now is the best defenseman in the league. So just, Andre and I were talking a little bit before. That really looked like the Avs. It was the worst case scenario playing out. You drop all the way to 4, and you're looking at a prospect that you didn't have a ton of context on because he was coming out of the AJHL. Yeah. And I remember the conversation being like, well, man, that's a lot of points regardless of the league. And turned out that was kind of spot on.
I mean, it's such an interesting thing, and it's really why I wanted to pop on here and get this done. I actually didn't realize until a few minutes ago that since we got you back, Jesse, we hadn't had a chance to get the old band back together. Yeah. So this is very special here. But it's very special, not just because I remember those podcasts fondly with the three of us together, but because I think about it often because of what an outlier Cale Makar has really become. And I mean, so there's a few different factors here. For one, isn't that the first lottery where if you had the best odds to win the lotto, you could have dropped all the way to 4?
Yep, that was the first one.
And it's because it's Vegas's first year, and there's a bunch of different factors in that.
Yeah.
Right?
It was Vegas's first year, which gave two teams the same odds at the third pick, which smoothed out the odds quite a bit, and then ended up being something that they wanted to continue with. And we saw ultimately under that system, which has since been changed, 3 teams that finished in last place ended up with 4th overall picks.
Well, and then further to that too, Dre, not only was that the first draft where you could, if you were the last place team, it used to be that you could only fall to 2nd. You're right in that was the first you could fall to 4th, but what was even unique about that year relative to the following years was because of Vegas, the Avs actually had worse odds than the teams that finished 31st the following years. So their percentage was decreased because they gave Vegas the 3rd overall odds.
And talk about, I mean, you look at Seattle rolling into the league and got the 2nd pick.
Right.
And now you go back and you look at that draft class and you look at Vegas, an expansion team getting the 6th pick.
6th.
And missing out on, and the conversation around that 2017 draft was, it's okay. We hadn't seen a guy like Nico Hischier rise up from the rankings to the top overall spot in a very long time. Right. And that really spoke to the volatility of the class. If you go back and you look at the midway point, like Bob McKenzie rankings, the guys that ended up going 1 through 5 aren't 1 through 5.
Right.
Like the guys that are there are Hischier, whose ascent had begun, and Nolan Patrick, who, when he got healthy, just tore everything apart again like normal. And he was the guy that year. And the one big story was, who's the defenseman? Because coming into the year, it was Timothy Liljegren, and he got mono that year.
Oh man.
And when he came back from mono, just didn't play very well.
Right.
And so it was like, what's going on with this guy? Is he any good? But he has freaking mono. Which is a thing. He's healthy now, but the after effects of that are pretty well known, that it takes a while for you to really be you again. And so the conversation surrounding that group at the top was like, we don't think there are any franchise players here, but there are some guys who are going to end up like solid pros. And then you look at it today and you have 3 bang on franchise players that go 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah. Because Pettersson was 5, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And Heiskanen goes 3.
Well, dropping out the top 2 is a miracle. It's a literal miracle. And
it's really dropping out of the top spot because the Avs, and I can tell you this hard and fast, the Avs had Patrick. They wanted Patrick. They were going to take Patrick. They had all the plans in the world on Nolan Patrick being the guy when they won the lotto. Well, we were going to have Nolan Patrick Day in Denver. It was going to be, Nolan Patrick Avenue was on its way. It was Nolan Patrick all day, no doubt. Slam it home. This is 100% for sure happening. No offense to Nico Hischier, but Nolan Patrick was the apple of the Avalanche's eye. Mm-hmm. And then,
and Dre and I were talking about this right before you jumped on, that when it's all said and done, and I actually think this was something that we talked about at the time, the Avs may have, them dropping to 4th may have been the best thing because you didn't have to make any of the tough decisions. You let other teams choose between Patrick and Hischier, who, there wasn't, that was a real toss-up as I remember it. I remember that conversation going back and forth a lot, to the point where we were even saying, is there a chance that Nolan Patrick ends up at 4? Because of how much that draft was changing with Cale Makar, people putting him on the radar. I mean, weeks before the draft, they were like, well, hold on, he's playing in the AJHL, but I think it was 70 something points in 40 games or something in the AJHL. And it's like, I don't care where you're playing. If you're playing major junior and you're putting up those types of numbers, that's something to look at.
Yeah. So it was everywhere for Makar. His D-1 year, he was point per game. His actual draft year, he had 75 points in 54 games, including 24 goals. Right. So the 24 goals is the thing that really stood out. because you don't you see defensemen have big point seasons on good teams. Like Duncan Siemens had a great draft year statistically and couldn't handle a puck. And you look at 24 goals from Makar, the guy was just dominating. And then you look at the postseason, he was a point per game. You go to the World Junior A Challenge, and the guy, he was okay his first go round, and then destroyed it the second time around.
Yeah.
And those are like his big showcases.
Yeah.
The World Junior A Challenge is a big thing for the guys that are playing in those leagues. Everywhere that he went his draft year, it was special. I mean, he was just so good. Yeah. And the problem was that he was coming out of the AJHL, and he did not have prototypical size.
And to put that in context, the AJHL, at the time, you didn't see guys get drafted in the first round from the AJHL, let alone the top 5.
There have been three AJHL first round picks in the last 25 years.
Right.
And Makar was the third one. The last guy that was a first round pick out of that league was Joel Colborn. So it gives you an idea how rarely that league produces high end talent. It rarely produces any NHL talent and not very many draft picks, just in general. But first round picks, no.
Yeah.
It just the BCHL is the junior A league that produces the players. The AJHL, the OJHL, it just doesn't happen very often. Yeah. The BCHL is the junior league that everybody usually flocks to. As we saw with a guy like Newhook, who goes from Eastern Canada, travels all the way across the country to play for the Victoria Grizzlies in the BCHL. That is common in Canada, in those leagues. What Makar did, I mean, he was just a tough read because the level of competition, the way that he dominated it, and his measurables. Like he's not a really big guy. Yeah. He's listed at 5'11", 187 pounds. On paper, you're like, okay. Right. So he's maybe just a touch on the small side. But then you watch him play. Yep. Mm-hmm. And you see he's so broad-shouldered, and that he loves to smoke people. And then you saw the skating, and you're just like, dude. And I tell you, one of the biggest reasons, I don't know if we've talked about this ever on an Avs pod, one of the big things that led to Wade Klippenstein, who is the Avs scouting director now, he absolutely went to the mat, pounded the table, and said, if you don't draft Cale Makar, you're making a franchise-altering mistake. I don't know who their 5th guy on their list was. Nobody's ever wanted to tell me, which tells me it's probably Cody Glass, given their love of the WHL. But they really liked Casey Middlestat. So they don't want to admit any of that shit. But I know Klippenstein went hard in the paint for Cale Makar and stuck his neck out and said, that's the guy that we have to draft, and eventually won over the Avs top brass. And again, like you mentioned earlier, when they got to 4, it made it easy. Yeah. Because it was great, we have an excuse to take one of the defensemen now. Because change Avs history here. If they get one of the top 2 picks and they take another forward, great. The Avs would eventually have a 2C problem that ended up solved by Nazem Kadri, but great. Right. That's all good and well, but you're using a top 2 pick to solve your 2C problem and not getting a franchise player here. It was fine. But it panned out really well because they had an excuse to finally take the defenseman. Before Makar, they had not used I believe it was a 1st or 2nd round pick on a defenseman since 2011 with Siemens. That's crazy.
And then they doubled down that year. They doubled down.
And then you look at their drafts over the next few years. They take Makar, they take Timmins, and then Obviously, they take Byram, but they also take Drew Hellison along the way. And all of a sudden, they're just defensemen. Justin Barron goes in the first round in 2020. These defensemen are just falling out of the fucking sky for these guys. It's just, it's crazy. It's crazy how the Avs shifted from why can't they find any defensemen to, oh, do you need a defenseman? Start in Colorado.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's so fun to think back on those shows and what you said there, AJ. Like I just remember us getting ready to, start recording and stuff. And we were sitting there watching those Makar highlights and we were like, man, this kid's a great skater. Wow, that's a great move. Well, his vision is crazy. Man, look at these reverse hits he's laying on guys. And it was just
I was down on him when we started. I was genuinely down on him. I watched 34 games of the Brooks Bandits that year. And by the end, I was like, he's Erik Karlsson. You got to take him. Yeah. And, of course, he didn't end up anything like Erik Karlsson. He ended up like Cale Makar.
No.
Yeah. Well, and so the –
what a talent.
Well, the last thing I'll kind of say is the other thing that I remember us talking about that, again, like shows why Cale Makar is smarter, is a smarter hockey mind than I am. The other thing that we were down on was the drawback is he's going to a bad program. Yeah, he's going to a bad collegiate program, and he's not going to get what he needs. And then he single-handedly turned that program into they're a powerhouse now. Yeah,
UMass had 4 wins.
Right.
When he committed, when he was going there. When he committed, it was a different coaching staff. And then he stayed committed because it's 1, that's who he is. And 2, Greg Carvel, speaking of Erik Karlsson, Greg Carvel was the guy taking over UMass who had helped develop Erik Karlsson as an assistant coach in Ottawa early in EK's career. And so he was like, this guy can help me. And not only was he correct, but that guy also helped. I mean, they all helped turn UMass around, as well as a pretty damn good player in Mario Ferraro, who was a second-round pick of the San Jose Sharks. Like, they all turned that program around. What's crazy is that they won the Natty without Makar.
Yeah, the following year.
Like, yeah, they go to the national championship with Cale and lose, get shut out. Makar, I think, ends up 1 point from becoming the first ever defenseman to lead the nation in scoring. Wins the Hobey Baker, loses the national championship, hops on a plane, flies to Denver, scores 8 minutes into his NHL debut in Game 3, all in a 72-hour span.
Yeah.
Crazy. Nuts. Well, and that's where we really knew, like, okay. I mean,
and just changed.
Yeah.
Just changed. I was standing 2 feet from Jared Bednar at the presser at the airport. When the Avs got off the plane from Calgary and Bednar came in, and we were like, my question was are they going to have his visa finished? Because he had to switch from a college visa to a work visa, and I was like, is the visa going to be finished in time? Turns out they were on top of that. They'd already started that thing. And then we asked Bednar, is he going to play? And he was like, yes. Like, it's funny to think about now, but because he's Cale Makar, but at the time, you're talking about a guy who's never played in the NHL, a team that is 1-1 now in a playoff series after the big overtime win, and has all the momentum coming back home on home ice. A fired up team, a fired up fan base, and everybody felt like something was coming. To add Cale Makar into, Cale Makar's first shift, the entire building was just like, it was like the whole building literally just vibrated with energy. Like, I bet that it registered on the Richter scale.
Dre, you made a good point, because I remember that goal went in, and that really was just like, holy shit. They actually stole the best player in that draft. Like, there was just a different confidence level to him on the ice. Jumping in on an odd man rush in all those same situations that AJ just laid out. The kid jumps in on an odd man rush, and is calling for the puck from Nathan McKinnon.
On the ice.
Yeah. hey, best player in the world right now, give me the puck. Like it's just I wanted to touch on it, but I'm gonna do these reads real fast. But there's a couple players across a couple different sports that year that were drafted that have kind of turned out to profile the same. But first, I do want to remind you guys, this is the Denver Sports Podcast, brought to you by Breckenridge Brewery. We're also brought to you by our good friends over at DraftKings. Listen, guys, we have hit the final week of the pro football regular season, and college football is heading into the national championship. DraftKings Sportsbook has an unbelievable offer to get all fans in on the action for this exciting time on the football calendar. New customers can bet just $5 on any team to win their game, and if they do, you win $200 in free bets. So let's wind down the season with a big win. DraftKings Sportsbook customers can also bet on football with same-game parlays. Combine multiple bets from the same game for a bigger payout. The more legs you add, the more money you can win. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. And best of all, you can deposit and withdraw cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code DNVR. Bet just $5 on any football team, college or pro, to win $200 in free bets if they are victorious. That's promo code DNVR this week at DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older. Colorado only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. And of course, if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700. Also brought to you by Mint Mobile. Look, the holidays are over, but that does not mean that the best deal in wireless, or that means the best deal in wireless can still be found only at Mint Mobile. Right now, when you switch to Mint and buy any 3-month plan, you'll get an additional 3 months for free. They're the first company to sell premium wireless service online only. Mint Mobile lets you order from home and save a ton with phone plans starting at just $15 a month. I talk about it every time. I've been on that side of the industry, of the mobile industry, guys. And there's no one doing what Mint is doing. Their service is great, and their plans, literally the pricing, you can't beat them. Again, if you buy any 3-month plan on Mint Mobile, you will get another 3 months free if you go in right now. Jesse, Andre, and AJ, this is the Denver Sports Podcast. We're talking 2021. We were mostly just talking Cale Makar because that is kind of where our group started. The other thing that I'm going to say, and then we'll kind of transition this into what I'm talking about, it's another thing Dre and I were saying right before the show got started. The other player, different sport, different league, that was also drafted when we were doing those shows, what seemed like at the time maybe out of place, was Patrick Mahomes. Obviously not a Denver athlete. But I remember us sitting there watching. I told Dre, AJ, I almost went back and pulled the Garrett Bowles reaction clip that I've got stored because we were watching the NFL draft live and reacting to the picks. But that was another one that I remember when the Chiefs took Patrick Mahomes. We were all, wow, that's a pretty off the board pick. But again, you trust your scouting. You can't knock guys for where they play. They can only play who's in front of them. And Patrick Mahomes and Cale Makar are kind of ultimate examples of, hey, if trust your scouting, and if this is the guy that fits, what you like, what you profile, then you take him and you believe in it. And in those two instances for the teams that took him, it's worked out pretty damn well.
Yeah, I mean, they're the ultimate outliers, man. And I mean, Texas Tech was more of a pro factory than the AJHL, but at the time, I remind people, no quarterback coming from that kind of air raid offense had really worked out in the NFL before.
Yeah.
So he just had that working against him. And again, it's like a factor out of his control. And I mean, I think a Giannis Antetokounmpo who's playing in the second division in Greece, who just won a title, it's so hard to sometimes adjust and fit a certain context, but if you get it right, they can be all-timers, like guys like Cale Makar.
Well, and development is such a huge part of it too, because guys are good at what they're good at the day they're drafted, but they have to continue to get better. I mean, Cale Makar had to go through 2 years of college hockey, and you saw the difference that it made. Year one, you were kind of like, all right, like there were some flashes there. And then by year two, you're like, what the hell's going on here?
Right.
you know, and you've just got to keep getting better. You know, Giannis didn't like Jokic. Giannis didn't just show up and was like,
100%.
I'm an MVP. You know, like there had to be some catering to each of those guys in order to really maximize their abilities. Because if they had coaches that tried to fit them into super traditional roles, into the small positional boxes that the NBA used to be much more well known for, versus it's now much more positionless style. We may never have seen the brilliance of Jokic and Giannis. And they kind of had to make their own mold of superstar in order to maximize as the talents that they've become.
Yeah, for sure.
And Mahomes, you remember, we always loved the arm talent, but mechanics were all over the place. The offense was wildly inconsistent, and it was totally unpredictable what you were going to get play to play. You could
Everything
get brilliance. Was off script. You could get total brilliance, or you could get mass chaos that just doesn't go very well. Right. It was very hard to project, and then he gets dropped into really an ideal situation. Yeah. He has one of the best offensive minds in a head coach. He gets an actual useful veteran, one that understands he's losing his job in Alex Smith, but helps him anyway because he's just a good dude and isn't like, I'm not going to help you take my job kind of veteran, which is how most of those guys are. And he gets an incubation period of a year, you know, and then he makes the absolute most of it and lights the football world on fire. It was extremely impressive.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Couple crazy moments from when we were back doing those old shows. But let's get into a little bit more. Let's drill down a little bit more on Colorado, on Denver sports teams. And since we've talked so much about the Avs, let's just kind of get them out of the way here, because I think they're the ones that pretty much have the most clear-cut expectations for 2022, the calendar year. Look, they're coming off a President's Trophy, 3 straight second round, trips to the second round of the playoffs. They've officially turned the page. I mean, this was a couple of years ago. They turned the page from a young up-and-coming team to one of the league's true elite contenders. We're talking expectations in terms of championships, Norris trophies, MVPs, stuff like that, right? For the Avs.
Yeah.
It's championship or bust with this core. I mean, I would argue that there's no better combo I would start a franchise with than Mac and Makar. And to come away championship lists from that core, I think we can all agree would be complete another sports tragedy, not just a disappointment, a true sports tragedy.
Could start a franchise with Rantanen and Byram and feel similarly.
I mean, so come on now. You got to come away with some real silverware. And I will dispute, though it's back-to-back second-round exits, that last year really was a conference championship exit. It's just the conference final teams were bumped down because it was a weird bubble format. So I saw progress every year, and now we will 100%. See even more progress. There you go.
I think this is something I'm getting ready to write, but I actually think that loss did a lot of good for them.
There you go.
Yeah,
it sucked to sit through, but we'll see what happens. But I've got this funny feeling that that's kind of building. This is going to be a thing that we look back on and we're like, went through that for a reason. Not
to relitigate this is going to be the only thing I'm going to say on it, but to the point that Dre just made, I made the point of 3 straight trips to the second round. Those 3 trips, none of them were built the same. There's completely different context to all of them. Yeah. I don't see it as a hump that they need to go over, but I think we're all in agreement. I think of the 4 teams, they have the most clear and defined expectations. You're competing for a championship, and anything else less isn't quite getting those expectations. We good on the Avs?
100%.
Yeah, cool. So let's talk about the Nuggets, because I think they're an interesting one for me. Because I think the last couple of years, I think the last couple of years, you would maybe say they were kind of on that same talk track as the Avs, but I think complicated is a great way to put it. where do you want to start on this one, AJ?
I mean, you have to start with injuries, man. That no matter what happens with the Nuggets, the injuries are just a reality. Even if they somehow change their fortunes and get comically lucky, and both MPJ and Jamal Murray are healthy this year, they won't be 100%. They will be. I don't know what the percentage would be, because you just never know with the recovery from injury, but they will not have had the time to really work themselves into proper game shape and 100%, knocking all the rust off and getting all the timing and all the reps, especially for Murray, who just hasn't played in so long.
Yeah.
It's just the reality of it that they're not that puts a hard cap on your expectations for them.
Yeah, and I mean, 2022 is almost not even relevant for MPJ at this point, because if he returns in this calendar year, it won't be in the meaningful end of this 21-22 season. It would be at the start of the 22-23 season. So the only one of those two superstars who's really going to play potentially meaningful basketball in this upcoming calendar year would be Jamal Murray, and his presence alone on the pick and roll with Yoke would make a world of difference, simply because they're so undermanned, and having to play some guys who aren't necessarily NBA players, and are just putting a ton of strain on the guys, the regular rotation players who are still playing right now. That would probably be a huge lift. It's also the least competitive Western Conference
in a long time,
probably of the 2000s, since Jordan left. Like, once Duncan got drafted to the Spurs, the West has not been as weak or wide open as it is this year. So Jamal, even an 80% Jamal Murray could be the difference between ruffling some feathers and maybe sneaking past around and getting frisky in another. But I think that's kind of the cap. And unfortunately, the storyline there is very much a wait and see, and very much a hold our breath and really clutch, pray every time there's an update on either of those guys, because just as we said, it'd be a sports tragedy for the Avs to not win a championship. I almost feel, and maybe to a lesser extent because the Avs are so stacked, the Nuggets core almost has those kind of expectations at this time. But these two injuries, it should 100%.
I mean, look, a starting five with like Jokic and Gordon and
MPJ.
Yeah,
and
thank you,
Murray.
MPJ and Murray and I guess Barton.
Right.
Like there's your like that's.
Yeah, and Monte signed long term as your sixth man. I mean, that is like, a strong core.
What are you looking at and saying, oh, that's a really big problem?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you might have some matchup issues depending on which team that you play,
100%.
but you're also going to present matchup issues depending on which team that you play, because you're so multifaceted and you're led by the freaking MVP of the league.
Right.
So,
one of the easiest superstars in NBA history to play alongside.
Right. Because
he's so malleable that you could pair anyone with him, which is an advantage that, I mean, if you have a mismatch problem, well, make a trade. Find someone who does, because Jokic can literally play with anyone. Yeah. But again, these two injuries throw a massive wrench in that plan, because for the first time in my life as a Nuggets fan, I have felt there's a glimmer of hope that I might once see a Nuggets title be won in my lifetime.
So let me ask you,
2022 is all about the medical updates,
Right. So let me ask you in that vein, because for several years there, in the 2010s, early 2010s, mid 2010s, the NBA really became like a 5-team league. Every year there was only a handful of teams that actually had a chance to win it, and we didn't know if we would ever see the Nuggets in this type of competitive window. So I think what you just said there, 2022 is about getting them healthy, but we all, I think we all feel the same way, that this is a group that once they're back healthy, and if they can stay healthy, should be legitimate contenders for an NBA championship, right? This is no longer 2014 where it's whatever team LeBron plays on and the Golden State Warriors, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they've managed to mitigate those small market issues. We just mentioned a core 6 that signed on long term, all making well over, I think, 15 mil a season.
They're now deep into the luxury tax era. Where they've very shrewdly danced around the luxury tax line previously, giving multiple max deals, and
now
giving Aaron Gordon, I think, 90 million. Like you're in the territory now where you're having to work hard to make big upgrades after this.
Right. And it really puts an onus on a GM like Tim Conley, who's praised for his great drafting, and rightfully so. But, those margins where you can find guys like Bones Highland at the end of the first and turn them into valuable rotation pieces is going to be massive as they really do find themselves in that, we all dream of having a team that's a contender. Then you have contender problems, all of a sudden it's like, well, you want it to be a contender. That shit ain't easy. Now these are like rich people problems you got to sort through. So welcome to the fight. Yeah.
The team in this city who's kind of having the exact opposite of those problems, Colorado Rockies. So we're heading into 2022. They are coming off an 87 loss season, 74 and 87. No more Nolan Arenado, and what all-stars are left. We are sitting here wondering if they are going to be here come opening day 2022. Look, we talked about it earlier this week.
Are we going to get an opening day in 2022?
Yeah.
Another great question, right? So if the limbo is strong for the Nuggets, it is intense for the Rockies.
Yeah, I guess that's a great point. So should the expectations for the Rockies be, let's see if they get on the field?
Step one.
Right.
Be allowed to field the team.
Will they play? Yeah, because we've seen some treacherous MLB lockouts in the history of this sport. And also, they are potentially looking at a calendar year where they basically lose 5 All-Stars.
Right.
And that might be the right thing, to just like burn it to the ground and start over. It's what many people have clamored for a while.
You could have made that argument had they done it via trade. Had they you trade Arenado you get what you get in return, and right now the return is actually pretty decent. But then you lose Gray, and you're likely going to lose Story for nothing. Right. And that's where you're like,
right.
Oh, totally.
What are you doing?
Yeah. And now it's like, what's the point of having German Marquez on your,
right?
If we're gonna field a triple A lineup, do you need the best pitcher in franchise history to walk his ass out there 5 days, once every week?
The best pitcher in franchise history just signed with the Texas Rangers. So,
fair
enough, I guess.
Fair enough. Yeah. So it's right. And then you have all those added factors for the MLB. The reshuffling that wasn't totally a reshuffling in the front office. So you have, you often have many questions as a Rockies fan going into a season. You have even less answers than usual, though, I think, this year, because usually the answers you're seeking as well, who's going to pitch in the 8th for us? And who will start at catcher? Will they be able to bat more than 190? Now the questions are a little more intense.
For once, their catcher questions actually answered going into the season.
They're
like, we're rolling with Elias Diaz, and then we're just going to go from there. That's one of the things that they don't have to worry about. But it's pretty much everything else where you're just like, I think the big storyline, the goal here for the Rockies is just pick a direction, and like watching guys just walk out the door for free doesn't feel like they picked a direction. It just feels like they missed an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I think that they've recommitted themselves to that sort of classic Rockies mold of draft, develop, smart, to really try to internally build up. And you look at the early returns on their last 2 first-round picks that they've made. The year that Zach Veen had last year, his first year in pro ball, was the kind of season where you start to get pretty hyped about him. The season that Montero had, the guy that came over, one of the guys that came over in the Arenado deal at third base, a pretty strong outing for him. And then you look at Benny Montgomery, the limited pro ball that he got to play last year. It's the easiest thing in the world to dream on Benny Montgomery in center field with Zach Veen with Zach Veen doing a very, very good Matt Holliday impersonation in left field or right. If they want to put him there, that's fine too. But and then not talked about as much, but Drew Romo just had a fantastic full season. And it is the Rockies might have a legit catcher of
that rare catcher prospect.
Right. A legit catching prospect that gets you excited, and not just one where you're like, well, we might be able to survive here at this position with this guy, and that's
like,
the
it's
one.
Not a wasted pick when he can start 50 games a year for you, even if it's very average to slightly below. If you can get above average play, holy cow!
If you can get like a guy that gives you a couple WAR at the catching position, you've found gold.
Absolute gold.
It's just and then the Rockies have never really had quality catching. They've always had the extremes. You're a great defender, but you can't hit. You can hit, but you can't defend.
Right.
They've only really, and that's of course that's not a Rockies problem. There are more starting catcher spots than there are starting caliber catchers in big league baseball right now. And so you have a lot of bums just sort of taking jobs, cashing checks. And the Rockies, it's funny, we're talking about like the catching position, but like the Rockies really, it's like just refocus on the future. See what you have in Raimel Tapia and Ryan McMahon, because I don't think that those are long-term building blocks anymore. And mostly just because the window doesn't line up.
That
anymore.
Window has vanished.
Those guys are going to age out of their prime by the time the next big wave of guys that you're excited about gets there.
You've basically punted on a generation of prospects,
including Brendan Rodgers, where you're like, you have. I've always compared Brendan Rodgers to Jeff Kent. I always thought that he was going to be a superstar at second base. He was going to be one of the best hitting second basemen in all of baseball. He had such an encouraging year last year. The funny thing is can he learn how to hit at Coors Field? Because if he can do that and he can replicate his road performance, he's an all-star. But what do you have around him? What good is it going to do them to have an all-star in the middle of their they replace an all-star in the middle of their infield with if Rodgers lives up to that potential. And now it's looking like he's the lone star of that era. Because all the other guys are just going to age out, or McMahon and Tapia probably just aren't. Consider me a pessimist, but I think we've seen it at this point. They've gotten better, McMahon especially, but I don't think that they're going to reach that next level where you're like, this guy's a stud.
Franchise cornerstone.
I think those guys, McMahon especially, would be building blocks on really good teams.
So the expectation for the Rockies is figure out what you're doing. We don't have any on-field expectations, but you need to get straight what direction you're heading.
At least establish a route.
I think that they've had 2 really strong draft classes in a row at the top of their draft. I liked them both a lot. And I think that they are on. I think they've got 2 prospects in particular who are on track right now to answer their longest running questions of catcher and center fielder. And that's great because they've proven time and time again that they can find all the other position players at a pretty decent level. Obviously, what happens with their starting pitching is a perpetual Rockies question. And Can they find relievers? Because nobody wants to pitch in Colorado, and nobody really wants to come to the Rockies organization right now. They have to dumpster dive and try and find relievers and get gems.
Right.
They have to, and you, in order to do that, you have to be one of the smarter organizations in baseball. And the Rockies haven't proven that they are. It turns out that Dick Munford, just sitting in his office making shit up as he goes, is not the cutthroat way to run a baseball operation to keep up with the likes of the Tampa Bays and the Oaklands of the world. So hopefully the new additions that they've made to their front office this year start to turn some results. But it's really just those new additions is really just them trying to get back into keeping up with the Joneses, and not, they need to be ahead of the curve as the kind of market that they are. And they're not really anywhere right now. I don't know how you
really
feel. Like I'm excited for some of these guys in the future, but organizationally there's still a lot of proving that needs to happen for you to feel any kind of confidence that you're going to go to Coors Field with an expectation that's higher than a cold beer and a great view.
Right. Yeah, it's best bar in Denver. Let's get to the last team here real quick. Denver Broncos, from 2011 to 2015, 5 straight division championships, obviously leading up to the Super Bowl 50 win. Since then, only one winning season, and they're about to miss the postseason for the 6th straight season. And in those 6 seasons, this will be the 3rd time they finish last in the division. Look, there's a lot that needs to be figured out. I guess maybe even before you could get into any type of legitimate expectation talk, because a lot of what unfolds in this offseason, I think, will kind of dictate what level of expectations you have for them. But Dre, just where we sit right now, what is it that you expect out of the Denver Broncos in 2022?
Yeah, I mean, you got to figure out the holy trinity at this point. You got to figure out, are you renting or buying at ownership? Because the trust just isn't. It's too much of a middling thing without a clear-cut direction and leadership from the very top. It's, are you renting or buying at head coach? Because I think Vic Fangio has shown he probably isn't the guy. But then if a new owner is around the corner, do you fire him only to hire a lame duck coach who will probably be on the chopping block the franchise is handed over to a new owner? And then quarterback, of course.
Right.
You really need to figure out, are you going to find some sort of long-term viable solution? Are you going to keep, bargain bin shopping and hoping that maybe you can get some, top 12 type of season out of some retread who was paired with the right coach, and that's enough to get you out of that playoff rut. And
is this their most important offseason since the Super Bowl? With a talented roster and the most cap space in the league, and like real talent on the roster. This is not like you look at the roster, it's not like, where are the players here? Yeah. You look at the most important positions on a roster, and you have a pretty good left tackle that's developed into a decent player. You have a pass rusher in Bradley Chubb that you can at least talk yourself into being like, there's your answer. You have a number 1 corner. You have a top defensive player beyond that in Justin Simmons. You've got some young talent that's developing really, really well around those guys. You have a little bit of depth here. You've got skill players at the skill positions on offense. You have a running back of the future that you love in Javonte. You have a wide receiver group that you love with Judy, Patrick, and Sutton. You fully expect that any kind of a next level quarterback unlocks all of Noah Fant's true potential. Like you're looking at a lot of the positions here, and you're like, hey, this is not a team full of bums. This is a team. This is a team missing the one big key piece, but there's also enough money for them to splash some cash to make a real difference.
So and they still have all their picks, they have all the assets to improve the way they want to improve. I agree with you, AJ, and you set out a very nice case. My only counter argument would be I felt like that last year, just because of how they were kind of setting themselves up and how strong that draft class at quarterback was, seemingly coming in,
And now look at it a year later, you're like, are any of those guys?
Yeah, I mean, Mac
going to
Jones
reach
might
that
be
potential.
half decent. Yeah,
I think the question with Mac Jones is, does he get any better?
Sure.
Like him being the best rookie, I don't think was a huge shock,
especially with the situation he goes to.
Exactly, but the question of how much better does he get, I think, is a very fair one.
100%.
We'll see. Maybe the guy's a superstar, and we just don't know it yet. But
100%.
Regardless of all that, I think that there's the potential for. I mean, there's always quarterback turnover in the NFL, and I don't
now than ever before.
I really just don't think that any other Broncos conversation matters. Whatever guys they sign, whatever offensive line help they go out and get, whatever defensive line help they go out and get, great. You always need those guys. You need help at those positions. They could certainly use upgrades around those around the lines, especially around the lines. But you're talking without a quarterback, all of it is undone again. Yep. So George, and I think you look at the asset accumulation that George Payton has done, and you understand he knows this. He gets it. He's got the security of a long-term contract.
Right.
And he can do that. Yeah, a lot of guys have the potential to be something special, but until they do it, you're just potential.
Oh, of course. And I mean, it's also like 18 weeks into a rookie season is no time to evaluate a quarterback.
Sure.
Class.
Like you don't, I mean, you are where you are today. You don't know where you're going to be tomorrow, right? Like you can guess and you can hope,
100%.
For me, I just think that the expectations around the Broncos, like this is the offseason. If they can't make it happen this offseason, then you start to wonder, are you going to be the Kansas City Chiefs where you go 30 years with no solution at this position?
Right.
And you just don't ever really matter.
And I guess for me, the other question is, do they need to come out, do they need to do all this offseason, and then do they have to make the playoffs next year? Or do they just have to show, marked signs of improvement? Because I think that's maybe one of the things that has frustrated Bronco fans in the last few years is that, like, they're not going anywhere. Like, the records have hovered around the same number for the last 4 or 5 years. Do they need to get into the playoffs next year, or do they just need to show, like, do they need to be in a more competitive race? Do they need to be, again, they were in the race this year, but everyone kind of felt the same way, right? We talked with Zach earlier this week from our DNVR Broncos, and he made the point of whatever that week 7 against the Cowboys was where it really kind of felt like, man, this is just maybe another one of those teams where we don't have it this year. Does next season
the Browns
not?
Game. Yeah, the Browns.
It was the Browns game. I'm sorry. Yep, you're right.
The Cowboys game is the one where you were like,
Yep.
Is there something here?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, the Browns game. Do you just need to go through a season where you don't have games where you feel like that in order for you to feel better about the direction of this Broncos team, or are we at the point where it's like, no, you have to start winning again?
If they have the kind of offseason that I'm talking about them having, yes. Like there are not major upgrades to be made at a lot of positions on the roster. If you go and you find a quarterback, I mean, not even MVP or anything, not a top 5 quarterback, but a true like top 12 quarterback. That's your difference maker. That puts you in the position where you have no excuses to miss the postseason. And they really, to be honest with you, shouldn't have missed it this year. And I think that's where you can look at the coaching staff and you can say we expected more than this. I think they should have made the playoffs this year, given the position that they were in. They fell apart at the biggest part of the season. They got into the spotlight and just couldn't quite get there.
Would you say they didn't have enough clutch players?
I would say that they didn't have a quarterback. I think Drew Lock sucks. So, I've always thought Drew Lock sucked, and I don't think he's done anything. Like he's got fun arm talent, and when he gets it right, he looks awesome. He just doesn't get it right often enough.
It's Matt Duchene.
Matt Duchene was actually a really good NHL player, though.
No, I know. Dre, you had a funny look on your face when I was asking that. What do you think?
No, I mean, I think we get a little too caught up in what our feelings are Sunday in, Sunday out. And even teams like the Los Angeles Rams or Tampa Bay Bucks, or when the Broncos went to the Super Bowl, there are plenty of weeks in the NFL where you are very frustrated because your team just doesn't perform up to expectations. That's football for you. It's hard to find a groove. It's hard for all 22 starters to really be hitting on all cylinders, especially with COVID and all the absences. And I swear, with taking 2 days out, we're seeing more injuries than ever. It's just a very constantly fluctuating deal. So I think to expect hey, we need to, that might just be pie in the sky, because even when you're a good team, even when you're the Baltimore Ravens, it's all good until your quarterback gets injured one week, and then it's well, shit. Right. Okay, maybe next year. So yeah, sports are volatile like that. That's just the truth. But
I will say it is the one thing between the NFL and NBA. In the NBA, if you don't have a superstar, you're done. In the NFL, if you don't have a quarterback, there's not even a conversation. I love Teddy Bridgewater.
You have the one-off
whole
season.
career, but that guy, you just if that isn't there for you, you're just done. You might sneak into a first round and get smoked by somebody. If you get really lucky, it'll be like the Tebow thing where you get into the second round and then get absolutely crushed by an actual good team, and you're just kind of done. You're just okay, well, there's such a hard ceiling on any meaningful season that you can have. Unless you're rebuilt, it's the joy of rebuilding is that you don't care about stuff like that. You're expected to lose, and you're worrying about the future all the time, and whatever happens. But when you have actual expectations, you're trying to find your way. It's the most frustrating place to be. You're stuck in the middle, and with no clear path to getting better.
Yeah, and I think quarterback, honestly, you should feel the same way about ownership. I think they're kind of 1A, 1B. They're equally as important.
So I tone for your organization, man.
I want to get into that. Let's do this last ad read, and then I want to get into exactly that. This is a DNVR Avalanche. Oh my gosh, this is the Denver Sports Podcast, brought to you by Breckenridge Brewery. We're also brought to you by our great friends over at Sexy Pizza. You guys know we've had Sexy Pizza at every Broncos tailgate we host this year, with the last one coming up tomorrow. And it is always delicious. And to finish up the Broncos season, we have a special discount offer for our fans starting Saturday, January 8th. So that's tomorrow, Saturday, January 8th through Wednesday, January 12th. Our fans can get 20% off their online orders using the promo code SEXYDNVR. Again, this is the last weekend of NFL regular season, college football playoffs, college football national championship coming up on Monday. Use this promo code, have Sexy Pizza at your watch party. They're 13 years in the Denver community. They're as local as it gets. I talk about it all the time. When I lived downtown, we would always walk over to their pizza window right near Coors Field, get a slice, get a whole pie if we had people coming over. You can do wings, pasta, knots. They've got side salads. My girlfriend Hannah's a vegetarian, so we'd always get her a salad to go with some pizza. We got dessert options, and of course, they have vegan options as well. Gluten-free crust. Literally, there is no excuse to not have Sexy Pizza catering your, your watch party. Use that promo code SEXYDNVR. www.sexy.pizza. Use the promo code SEXYDNVR. That is Saturday, January 8th through Wednesday, January 12th. We're running a little bit long here, so we'll kind of go through this last one quick. But I want to hear from each of you guys, and I've got one for myself. Dre, I'll start with you. What is your number one storyline to follow in 2022 for Colorado sports?
I'm glad you started with me, because I think I think I'll rank them for you. Number 3 would be the return of Jamal Murray. number 2 is the Broncos finding a quarterback, and number 1 is the Avs simply winning a title. When you have a legitimate contender in town, that is the biggest storyline. It supplants everything. And then, you get into all the various added factors and all the talent the Avs have, how young that core is, and, but blah, blah, blah. And you could even divvy that up into different storylines,
right.
Will the finesse defense be good enough to win a title? Finesse in air quotes.
Right.
Can Mac take over a series and be the best player in the world in a key game 5 and a key game 7? And then can Darcy steal a few games? I think, So there you go. You guys get to talk Avs year round, 5 days a week. So I just took that to go forward.
No, I that was because I have a few jotted down here, and that was one of mine, because there are some big storylines this year. I think you made a great point, but Denver has showed this is a sports town, and when you have a true contending team, the fans show up, the city shows up. You felt that real buzz for the first time last year, where I just remember walking around downtown, and every other person was an Avs hoodie, an Avs t-shirt, a jersey, a hat, a beanie. It's the real deal this year. I agree with you. AJ, do you have anything different than what Dre just kind of laid out?
Yeah, I think that I don't even know that the Nuggets would be in the top 3, just because, unfortunately, the injuries have kind of made it. Yeah. We'll see you guys next fall. Mm-hmm. And now, look, if they get one of those guys back, that might change the conversation. But for right now, this very moment, I don't think that the Nuggets are a top 3 conversation for me. I don't think they're a top 3 storyline. And if they are, it's just Nikola Jokic trying to force his way into an MVP conversation that the NBA badly doesn't want him to be part of. Right. But I think that I would say that obviously the Avs cup chase.
Yeah,
it's just clearing away number 1 this year. It would be 1 and 2. It would be 1 and 1 if the Nuggets were healthy. Those would be the biggest stories, and there wouldn't be a separator. They'd be on equal footing. I think the second biggest story is the Broncos ownership conversation.
That was my third one.
Yeah, and then Broncos quarterback, I guess.
Yeah. No, so it sounds like we all have the exact same 3. I do. I put that Avs cup chase at 1, but I do. I have the Broncos ownership at 2. And a lot of it has to do with a point that I believe it was you, Andre, made earlier. They're in a really weird spot with a lot of the personnel, because if you're going to have an owner drop that kind of money to purchase a team like the Denver Broncos, they're going to want to have some say in coaching and stuff. Obviously you got Peyton there as GM, who, I think everyone's pretty happy with what he's done in his first year there. And I don't necessarily think, his job would be in jeopardy with a new owner, but I just don't know how a new owner, right. I don't know how Elon Musk would feel about, coming in and not having at least a say on a quarterback. And obviously that's a name out of head, but even Peyton Manning, if Peyton Manning is part of that group that comes in and buys the Broncos, don't you think that they would want to have some type of say? So I think that's a bigger storyline than the quarterback, because I think you have to get that ownership figured out before you can start making any of those real big decisions that eventually all trickle down to quarterback. So I think that comes in second, but you have a legitimate championship chase on in the city, where you've got a team that's the expectation, not, wow, we hope they can get there. The expectation is you're there, you're competing, and you win. I mean, I especially with the way they're playing right now, and the roster they've got, the money, the Avs, not necessarily money, but they made a chips all in move this summer going and getting Darcy Kemper. They gave up a very, very good prospect who was transitioning out of prospect status. They gave a first round pick. And you started to see Kemper play the way that you expected. Head over to the DNVR shop and check out the new Kemperer shirt that we just dropped last night.
Yep.
Way dope. Yeah, right there.
You know what it is for me? It's the details.
Yeah.
If you look at the visors on the helmets, on the skulls, the one with the beard is like a cracked visor. And I'm just like, oh my God, the little touches that Eric put into this are incredible.
Yeah. It just looks and like I've never thought the Avs had good colors for stuff like that, but like the way that he did it with the gray on the black, like everything just looks so good.
Amazing. DNVRlocker.com. Check it out. Actually, the shirts just came in, so these will be shipped out right away. But this first batch has basically gone already. So get yours now while you can. If not, you'll have to wait a couple weeks as we'll have to order more. That's just the deal.
Yeah, no. So they're going quick. They're shipping out quick. So if you want one, make sure to head over to DNVRlocker.com. Always. Steph's always on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so head on over there, get one ordered. If you miss out on the first batch, we'll get one out to you. Don't worry. But yeah, head on over to get the Kemperer shirt. But again, he played like that last night. And he's played like that for 6-7 games in a row now. And that's what you really do. You sit there and you say, okay, you spent the assets. And there was a conversation we had when they did it. If you win a cup, nobody gives a shit.
No.
Nobody cares about the first round pick. Nobody cares about Connor Timmins. So that's the number one storyline for me. But I do think that Broncos ownership it's going to be a big deal this year.
How much of a relief is it that there's no one really out west in a series that you're like, man, that dude between the pipes really scares me to go against in a 7-game series?
Yeah.
But there's not really anyone, then Stanley Cup matchups, there's plenty of guys I could worry myself about from the East. But out west, like I was looking at the Vezina odds, Markstrom's the shortest odds of, like, I'm not scared of Markstrom. Like,
right. No,
high scoring games every single night. Like, that's a hammer the over team. That's not
right.
Markstrom's going to shut it down and steal 3 games and beat us in round 2. Like, not really. No, thank you.
Right. No, and to your point, and God, hopefully I don't eat these words, but like when you look at the NHL with the offensive core the Avs have, the production they're getting from their blue line, I think the only goalie that worries you like that is Andrei Vasilevskiy in Tampa. Yeah. And I mean, that guy is rapidly like entering the greatest of all time conversation. Well, you don't want that?
There are more guys than that I lose sleep over.
In goal?
Yeah.
Who?
I'm UC Saros is legitimately very good.
No, I'm not saying that there's not.
Well, he had.
I'm not saying that there's not.
He's the shit, dude. He's so good, and Nashville has rounded out enough of their talent. Has finally showed up randomly that I'm like, oh God, this is what I was worried about with the Preds. I think that, and we've seen 2 games between these 2 teams. Both of them have been heavily compromised lineups, so they're totally useless data points.
And I'm not saying there aren't really good goaltenders out there that on any given night, you're like, oh man, that guy can come in. But I'm just saying over a 7-game series, Andrei Vasilevskiy is the only one that I'm worried where it's like, man, that guy could steal a series from the Avs. Again, assuming health and all that stuff. There's just not a ton of goalies out there that worry me. UC Saros is having a very good season. There's a lot of good goaltenders out there. But
the guy, oddly enough, the guy that got lit up last night is exactly the kind of
right.
Guy that you don't want to see.
100%. I love Hellebug. I mean,
and last night's actually kind of my point where I sit there. I'm like, there's some really good goalies, but over the course of 7 games, if this team is clicking the way that you hope they are come playoffs, it's just there's just so many waves of elite talent, elite offensive talent that I mean, you have to turn in an all-time goaltending performance to have a goaltender be the one that steals a series from you. Right. I'm not saying you're not going to run into a very good goaltender and a very good team, but to say to Dre's point, like, man, I'm worried about that goalie stealing a series against a team that shouldn't beat us. I just don't know.
Yeah, no, and I mean, there's some stud goalies, but I think it's that combo of like team who scares me with the stud goalie who could I just don't totally see it out west at least. So
I'm with you.
That gives me a little
Still
more
Vegas.
confidence.
Vegas for sure. Yeah. Different, but again, not necessarily.
I'm not scared of Leonard. I mean, and
Vegas, the team.
But my words,
Yeah, Vegas, the team scares me more than Leonard, the goalie.
Well, especially Vegas with Eichel getting at it.
Yeah, right. Cool, guys. Well, hey, I know we were going to try to keep this close to 45, but in vintage fashion, we went about 20, 30 minutes over. But no, guys, honestly, thank you so much for jumping on to do this. We need to do this, the three of us, more. These conversations are always so fun, and I always love to hear what you guys have to say. We'll do it again. Thank you, guys. For Andre, for AJ, I am Jesse Montano. This is the Denver Sports Podcast presented by Breckenridge Brewery. We'll talk to you guys next week.